Hello everyone. Today our topic is this is what would happen if a gun were fired in space. For the greater part of 70 years, governments and more recently, private companies and individuals have been launching items and people into space. Yet we have only scratched the surface when it comes to unraveling the mysteries that exist up there. When space missions are not focused on commercial or military goals, such as deploying or repairing satellites or conducting ground surveillance, astronauts have conducted scientific research. The great majority of scientific experiments undertaken in space have focused on space itself, such as the impact of microgravity on various life forms, humans, or species. Few of the experiments carried out up there were designed to satisfy scientific curiosity about the hypothetical and significant topic, such as what would happen if a cannon was discharged into space. In reality, there is not any reason to. Everything we need to know about weaponry, space, and physics are already has learned. You may recall from primary school science class that fire requires three things to function: heat, fuel, and air. According to life science, a gun works by harnessing the power of fire by creating an explosion that drives the bullet out of the chamber. However, because space is devoid of air, a crucial component of the equation is missing. The bullet would fly off into space. That is not a problem, though, because contemporary ammunition has an oxidizer, a chemical that allows combustion to occur even when there is not any air present. The rifle and the bullet will work just as well in space as they would on Earth, since everything you need is right there is a bullet. Of course, there would be some slight variation due to the lack of air in space to carry sound waves. You would not be able to hear the explosion unless you shot it from within a spacecraft, which would be a terrible idea. Instead of the whipsy vapor trail seen in movies, the smoke would simply expand into a spiral from the barrel tip. Due to gravity and friction, the bullet can only fly so far on the ground. Gravity and friction still exist in space, but their effects are vastly different, as demonstrated by the fact that you could shoot a bullet up there. According to Harvard scientist Majida Hook, after the bullet is shot, it will most likely travel through space until the universe hits death. The bullet will never stop because the cosmos is expanding faster than any substantial quantity of mass can catch up with to slow it down, Hook explained. The shooter will be shot into space as well. Of course, that implies that the bullet will not be grabbed by star or planets' gravity and pulled back down. However, given that anything with actual mass, like stars and planets, take up such a minuscule fraction of the universe in comparison to the immense expanse of space, the chances of happening are exceedingly remote. If you have ever shot a gun in real life, you are probably aware that it produces a kick that you must expect and presumably brace yourself for, lest it throws you off balance. Holding the pistol incorrectly can result in a kick that can harm a shooter, not to mention obstruct the gun's aim and endanger onlookers. As life science explains, the kick is a result of the one of physics' most fundamental laws, Newton's third law, which states that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. In the absence of gravity and friction, this means that the bullet will travel in one direction while the shooter will travel in the opposite direction, as explained in this Business Insider YouTube video. The speed at which the bullet and shooter are sent in their respective direction is determined by the velocity and weight of shooter and bullet. According to the video, firing an AK-47 sends the shooter backwards at 0.068 miles per hour, whereas firing a tiny handgun with a slower moving but a heavier bullet sends the shooter in the other direction or far around double that speed. You could also shoot yourself in the back, theoretically. Consider yourself an astronaut orbiting above the Earth, perhaps on a space wall, far enough away from your spacecraft to fire your weapon without endangering your crew. Everything at that altitude, including you and your craft, is orbiting the Earth. According to life science, if you shoot your rifle at the precise proper angle, the bullet would also enter orbit around the Earth. You may be able to see why this might be an issue. But if not, consider following scenario. Because orbit are circular, the bullet will eventually circle the Earth and return to its original location. According to Brown University astronomer Peter Jones, via life science will have effectively shot yourself in the back, since you are now positioned between the bullet and the beginning point to which it returning. Perfection is the goal, he added. Salt's note scientists have investigated self-hits in space to investigate impacts with tiny asteroids, space stress, and so on, but have decided against it. It was being tried by the Soviets. As it turns out, shooting guns in space is not just a hypothetical situation, rather it was a genuine experiment carried out by the Russians. As the medium explains, the Soviets did not use guns as much as cannons, but the outcomes were the same because both devices worked on the same premise. According to previously classified records uncovered after the fall of the Soviet Union, it happened in 1975. The entire experiment was carried out from the ground. There were no cosmonauts on board at the time. The scientists attached the cannon to the Salyut 3 spacecraft, oriented it in the direction they want it to go, and fired it 3 times. The Soviets, being aware of Newton's third law and all, activated the spacecraft rocket thrusters to counteract the explosion recoil. Regrettably, the experiment findings are still secret. However, it's safe to infer the cannon projectiles are still rising through space to this day, bending the cannon accuracy. For decades, the Soviets and Russians have been sending guns into space. Guns in space are not simply a theoretical concept for the Soviet and later Russian space programs. According to NBC News, cosmonauts have been bringing guns into space the decades, but not to fire them while in flight. They had a far more practical purpose for doing so. Returning astronauts land in the middle of the Pacific Ocean in the early days of US space program when the Navy could pluck them out of the sea. The Russians, on the other hand, have continued to return their workers to the iron ground, particularly in the vast grasslands of Kazakhstan. According to the Smithsonian's Air on Space, where they may have wait hours, if not days, up for rescue. As a result, they were and they provide with the survival kits that include food rations, first aid kits, and at one time firearms in case they come across dangerous species of or unfriendly locals. For example, in an article for IEEE Spectrum, space journalist James Oberg highlighted that the Russians have seized including firearms in the kits the cosmonauts take into space. Despite the Russian Space Agency refusal to comment. Thanks for watching.